before you start posting about it.
It's extremely rare. It's called Paroxysmal Nocturnal Hemoglobinuria, or PNH for short. And it's like I said, it's extremely rare. It's like, I think it's about 1 in a million. And basically what happens is, kind of the short version is, my white blood cells turn on my red blood cells. My red blood cells are missing. I think it's a complement protein. Once again, I have a doctor that knows this stuff a lot better than me, and really what happens is, essentially they start breaking and I start peeing them out. And when I pee them out, my urine is black. Like, it looks like a red wine. It's a mess. And usually it happens for about 3 days. It's episodic, and then it clears up. And I'm always anemic, but I don't really think about it. And over time, it had progressed to where 98% of my red blood cells had been affected by PNH. So that's basically all of them. And what happened was kind of like, finally, like, it just kind of, everything just started breaking, and I was peeing it out, and I went really, things got really dark. Like I couldn't walk to my kitchen without needing to sit down and actually literally take a nap afterwards. Like, I was completely, thanks Alfie, completely devoid of any energy. And then so I got diagnosed with a condition way back in the early 2000s, and promptly did not give a shit about it, because I was drinking at the time. I'm an alcoholic, right? I don't drink anymore, but it's been almost 10 years, but I have that demon in me. And I was in the throes of that. So I was partying all the time. I was like, whatever, live fast, die young, leave a good looking corpse. If this is going to be the way, so be it. And then it all came to a head in November. And it turned out that, according to my doctor, I had literally been walking around with a gun to my head, just constantly pulling the trigger, and the bullet never happened, because I should have had a stroke. I should have had a heart attack. Because the red blood cells coagulate, they clot, and they move. They move to the brain, or they move to the heart, they move to the lungs. And she used the M word. She said it was literally a miracle that I didn't have this happen to me. And so they put me on this drug called Ultomiris. Ultomiris is it's an orphan drug. It's really only used for this one condition. And I will be on Ultomiris for the rest of my life. I have to get infusions every 2 months to keep me from backsliding. I mean, I won't drop dead if I don't take it, but I'll steadily decline back to where I am.
This is a drug infusion, or what kind of? Okay, yeah.
I go to the hospital, and they give me it's about a 2-hour process. They put an IV bag of it into my system, and I'm on that forever. And it's been interesting, because it's forced me to confront my own mortality, especially. There was a window of time when I got sick, and I went to the emergency room, and they referred me to a specialist, and the specialist told me, look, right now it could happen at any moment. This hammer could come down, and this stroke, heart attack, or I think it's a pulmonary embolism if the clot moves to the lungs. Literally, it could happen anytime. We don't know if you're going to make it. You've just got to, we're just going to do our best. We're going to monitor you, and we're going to try and get the drug into you in time. And fortunately, it all worked out, which is why I'm here being able to speak to you now. But it was, and then that was about a 6-week process right before 2020. And then we got into 2020, and the whole world turned to shit. So it's been a wild ride. But
how have you been able to get these infusions during the pandemic? I guess they were able to.
Pretty concerned about that, but the drug is made in America, and therefore there were challenges with some drugs coming in from China. But luckily, this is a United States manufactured drug, so I've been able to get my medication without any issues at all. I'm permanently iron deficient. I'm taking iron supplements, but I'm always going to be low. But I mean, it's a small price to pay. And unfortunately, on the topic of COVID, Ultomiris provides theoretical protection against the worst ravages of COVID-19, because apparently what causes the most damage to your lungs is your body's own immune response, the complement protein, what damages your lungs. The drug I'm on is a complement protein inhibitor. So it's theoretical because there's really no sample size at all to you know, ancient COVID, as far as I know, there haven't been anyone that's had both yet, but theoretically.
That's what happens though. There's the cytokine storm from the over-inflammatory response. That's deadly for a lot of people, even if they don't have underlying health issues.
Yeah. So I have the drug I'm on, Ultomiris, is a complement protein inhibitor. So it should theoretically. The downside is I now have zero natural immunity to meningitis or meningococcal, I think is the other one. There's a couple of like conditions that I'm acidic duct for. So I have to take the immunizations, and I have a card that if I get sick, I have to go to the emergency room and show them, and it explains like I'm on this drug and I might have meningitis and I need to, you know, do this and that. But it's having to kind of hear those things from a doctor. I mean, my armor is always humor. So if you tell me that, you know, something bad's going to happen, my first response is to try and crack a joke about it. And it's like, you know, it's like my inner Roger Moore comes out and I try and be witty. And I'm like, this time I did that, but it quickly like sank down. I'm not too proud to admit, like I got to that car and I cried my eyes out because I'm like, fuck, this sucks. Like,
hey man, that's a natural, nothing wrong with that. That's a natural response.
It's pretty terrifying for me, to be honest with you. And then like I just came to terms, I started a meditation practice based off of it, because I just wanted to get comfortable with the idea of like being that my body is breakable, it's finite, it's not going to be there forever, and just try and start cultivating a little bit more of, for want of a better word, a spiritual life, which, you know, and even though I've had that in my life, like I lived in an ashram for a couple of years when I was young,
that's right.
But it still forced me to come to terms with a lot of things, and it's in a lot of ways. I know it sounds like a cliche, but I'm almost grateful it happened, because it's made me so much more appreciative and grateful of the time that I have, and it's made me more driven to do the things I love with the people that I love. So you know, it's not been all bad, but it was rough, man. It was really hard. You know, I mean, you don't want to have that confidence. You never want to hear that from a doctor. Like, hey, guess what? You could drop that at any moment, and there's nothing we can do about it until we get this drug to you, and we've got to kind of jump through all these hoops before we can do that.
I think when you hear something like that, you're reminded that there's so many things that are out of our control. We like to think that we can control things a lot, especially someone like me. I'm a bit of a control freak. That's the other thing that the therapist brought up with me. It's like you're always trying to regiment things and try to control outcomes. And there's some things that are way out of our control, and this is a perfect example of that. The only thing you can control is not even your initial response is totally natural. My response wouldn't have been any different than what you said. You happened to you. You're crying in your car. But what you do after that, that's what you have control over. So now you're saying you're living more fully. Maybe you weren't as authentic with people around you as you were before, as you are now, because whenever I've been through any kind of tragedy, all of a sudden you have this emotional outpouring that comes out for a bit, right? You start calling people and telling them things that you wouldn't have said before. And sometimes they're uncomfortable because they've never seen that side of you, but you're like, I got to get this out there because I don't know if I'm going to get an opportunity to ever say this again. And some of my regret, the last conversation I ever had with my mom was a bad one, because I thought I had all the time in the world to talk to her. I talked to her one day and I was busy doing something, and I said, let me call you back tomorrow. And she said, okay. She was dead the next day. So ever since that, that one weighs on me a lot, honestly. That one weighs on me big time. And whenever people say I don't have any regrets in my life, I go, well, I don't know what kind of life you've led, because I've got plenty of regrets. But I try to be proactive about how I deal with those things. Like, okay, now I got to be a better person with other people. Now, let me say this while I can, as opposed to, I'll have time. I think a dangerous thing is when you think you have all the time in the world to do whatever it is you want to do, whatever it is.
It's so bizarre when you look at our society, the one inevitability that we all have to accept is death is going to happen, right? We have a limited amount of time, yet 99% of us are happy to waste that time. You know what I mean? And not appreciate it. And I know that you can be on level 10 in the moment mindfulness 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. It's not real. But at least like finding those moments in your day and in your life to appreciate that. And I was dragged into that understanding by my hair in this particular case. Like I was like, oh shit, I'm actually gonna die. Like at some point, like it might not be now, but it really forced me to like look at life in a very different way.
I think it's hard to appreciate life if you've never had a near-death experience.
You had that one.
I really do. I've had a couple. But the one that's most prominent is when I had a really bad case of pneumonia, or I had a really bad flu that turned into pneumonia. And this is in 2002, where both of my lungs got filled up with this bacteria, and they had to stick a tube and pull that out. And that would have been, if I let it go any longer, it would have been fatal. So it was, the doctor even told me that. It was funny. It was a British guy, and because I was in Uganda to visit my parents. And so I come in there. He's a really funny guy. But when I come in there, he's like, God, you're a fucking idiot to let it get to this point. What were you thinking? And I was like, yeah, you're right. You're right. I just sit there and argue with him and all that. And then all of a sudden, when he just ripped on me and I just took it, all of a sudden he changed his tune. He's like, okay, I like this guy.
Yeah.
And so when he stuck the tube on my back and I didn't even flinch, he's like, okay, this guy's not a pussy. and then as he's pulling all this fluid out of my back, he's like, hey, you're not like most Americans. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, well, most Americans are a bunch of whiny little bitches, especially the ones out here.
Yeah,
he's like, they'll come into my office if they have a splinter in their thumb. He's like, but you